Hello there, I'm Jill Webb and I run a small training company called Jill Webb Training. One of my training offers is first aid, and what I want to do today is to remind you what to do if you find somebody unconscious. If you have a look down here, we've got Danny, and you can see he doesn't look so good today. So if you find someone who appears to be unconscious, before you go rushing in, you need to think about yourself and your safety. First of all, I'm thinking, is there anything here that could hurt me? Could anything drop on me? Could I trip over anything? And then I'm thinking, could anything come out of Danny that could hurt me? And that's where I'm thinking about my gloves. I'm thinking about the risk of cross-contamination. So I'm putting my gloves on. Now we've decided it's safe to approach my casualty, I want to see if he's going to respond. I'm going to feel mighty silly if I call 999 and he's actually just having a nap. So I'm going to do something like, Danny, can you hear me? If you can hear me, open your eyes. Let me do that again and then I'll explain to you the thoughts behind that. Danny, can you hear me? If you can hear me, open your eyes. So you will notice that I've shouted in both Danny's ears. He might be deaf in one ear. He maybe has got an ear infection. So I've checked whether he's responding to my voice. I'm giving him a simple command. He might not be able to speak, but he may be able to open his eyes. With a younger casualty, I might want to say something like, squeeze my hand if you can hear me. And then you'll notice I shook his shoulders to see if there was any response to physical touch. Something you'll have done on your course is the AVPOO scale. Is the casualty responsive? Is he alert, responsive to voice, responsive to pain, or unresponsive? So very simply, in a few seconds, I've established that my casualty is unresponsive. So the next thing I'm going to do, if I'm by myself, is try and get some help. Because let's be honest, unconscious people of any age ain't good news. We don't normally wander around the place collapsing. So I'm probably just going to literally shout, might be somebody else around, help, is there anyone around that can help me? So let's put that together. Danny, can you hear me? Come on, if you can hear me, open your eyes. Help, is there somebody around that can give me a hand? So now my really important thing is to check whether Danny is breathing, because not breathing is the first thing that can kill you. So to do that, we're going to check his airway. To check the airway, you need to take one hand and place it on his forehead and tip that forehead right back. You're going to take your other hand, and a bit like you might have done when you were a child, making shadow puppets on the wall. Can you see I've got my thumb and two fingers pinching? And I'm going to pinch his chin to lift that chin. So you can see that he was like that before. And what I've done is I've done a head tilt and a chin lift to really open the airway. And I'm just going to show you on myself what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm trying to achieve a real tip back. So if you feel your windpipe there, so that airway is as open as possible. So that if his tongue has slipped down his throat, I might be mightily relieved to get a great big gasp and realise he's breathing. So head tilt, chin lift, and I'm going to look, listen and feel for 10 seconds. So I'm looking down Danny's body, hoping I might see some breaths. I'm listening, because if he's not well, I might be able to hear some gasping or some rattly breaths. And I'm feeling, and that's particularly useful if you're outside, because you might be able to feel on your cheek that there's some breathing. So I'm looking, listening and feeling for 10 seconds. And in that time, I'm hoping with an adult to see 2 or 3 good breaths. With a child, it will be more. The main thing is I want to see 2 or 3 breaths before I do anything else. Because, of course, what I don't want to do is see Danny breathe his last. So we've established that Danny is unconscious, but this casualty is breathing. He's good, by the way, but he's not that good. We have to imagine the breathing. So what we're going to think about now is what else could kill him. The next thing that could kill Danny is a life-threatening bleed. So I'm going to look for circulation issues. Now, obviously, most bleeding that Danny's going to do, we'd see, particularly on a lovely white floor like this, it'd make a right mess, wouldn't it? But, of course, he could be bleeding, say, behind his neck, behind his torso, perhaps even behind his knees. If he's a child with wellies on, down the side of his wellies, he might be bleeding quite badly there. So I'm just checking very quickly whether he's got a severe bleed. And I'm thinking about what I say to him. There's a lot of evidence that the last sense to go is hearing. So I'm not going to say, oh my goodness, Danny, what a mess you're in. I can't believe you're unconscious. We're going to get into such trouble. Oh, I'm going to have to fill the accident book in. We're just saying, Danny, it's Jill here, one of the first aiders. Just check and see if I can see what's happened. Oh, you're looking good. That's great. So before I do anything else, and particularly if I need to leave Danny because no help has come and I'm going to need an ambulance, I'm going to put Danny in what we call the safe airway position. The safe airway position, you might also know as the recovery position, is basically getting a casualty onto their side to make their breathing easier. The science behind this is really easy. Think how you sleep. Most people sleep on their side or their front, and most people confess to me that if they sleep on their back, their partner, if they have one, quite often has to prod them because they're snoring. It's easier to breathe when we're on our sides or our fronts. So what we're going to do is this. We're first of all just going to check, have a quick check, Danny's got a nice loose top on, but what if this was a school tie to undo or a belt? So we're going to check that nothing is going to constrain Danny. As we do that, we're going to just be keeping an eye out because if Danny's got an underlying medical condition, he may well have a Medi-alert, a little bracelet that might say he's diabetic or asthmatic, just something to give you a clue. Once we've done that, we're also going to check that the ground that we're going to roll Danny onto is nice and clean. No broken glass, perhaps syringes, anything like that. We don't want to compound the problems. So I've checked, I've loosened his clothing, I've checked that the area I'm going to move him onto is clean, and the first thing I'm going to do is take the hand nearest my body and I'm going to put it right up there. I'm just going to put it as far up as I comfortably can, and that will depend on the age and flexibility of your casualty. I'm then going to take his other hand, and to do that I'm going to take my hand which is nearest his head. So the hand which is nearest his head, I'm going to reach across the body and I'm going to hook his hand there. So my hand nearest his head came across the body and hooked. And if Danny was a real life casualty, I'd get him to wave his fingers and I'd have made a butterfly. I always say you can tell my first training was in early years. And then I'm going to take the back of Danny's hand and put it against his cheek. Look how flexible Danny is, eh? Bet you wish all your casualties were that flexible. And I'm going to put my hand behind his neck. So I've got the first arm out of the way, I've come over, I've brought the second arm, and can you see I'm holding really carefully there, and I'm holding behind his neck. So to help me move him, particularly if he's quite large, but anyway, this is really good practice, I'm going to bend the leg that's furthest away from me up as far as I can. Might be able to bend it right in towards the bottom, and then literally I'm going to use that as a lever. So I'm going to, as smoothly and carefully as I can, roll Danny over towards me. Nice and slow, there's no prizes for speed, it's about safety and care. As Danny tips, his body weight's tipping towards me. First thing to do is take that leg and put that out there, because that gives me a bit of stability. He's a bit more stable now. I can sort his head out. So I'm going to bring his head down, and I'm going to make sure that his head is pointing downwards. And what's going to come up on screen in a moment is 2 pictures of a head in a correct and an incorrect position. So just to summarise, before I leave my casualty, I'm making sure that he's in the best possible position for breathing. He's got a stable, open, draining airway. SODA. Stable, open, draining airway. If your casualty can open their eyes, they should be looking down at the ground at 45 degrees. And now I can leave him to go and get help, or if somebody else has gone to get help, I can monitor my casualty closely. If you're renewing your first aid, it's useful for me just to point out that we're more and more recommending rolling casualties into the safe airway position, even if you can stay with them. We used to say, oh, you only need to roll them over if you're going to leave them. But that's because there is so much evidence that it saves lives because it's easier to breathe when you're on your side. So I hope that's been a useful recap, and thank you very much.